Hi all, I'm Thomas and I work at the Information Lab UK. I'll be walking you through this week's challenge 470. And for this week's challenge, we are asked to build a tower by piling up blocks. Let's have a look at the input first. And so we have blocks from A to Z, and each block has its own weight, load capacity, and height. And what we want to build is we want to use these blocks to build towers, and the towers remain valid as long as every block can support the total weight of all blocks stacked above it. So this means that, for example, for block A, I can't really place block B on top of block A because block B's weight is higher than block A's load capacity. But I can, for example, stack block C above block A. And so for this challenge, we want to build an iterative macro that produces all buildable towers from the 26 blocks provided. So this means that with each iteration, we're basically adding another block to the existing set of blocks, aka towers. And in our final output, we just want the height of the tallest tower, the max height. So okay, let's start by building the macro first. I'm gonna copy and paste this text input onto a new workflow. And for this macro, I'll actually need two inputs. One will be the blocks that I'll use to build the towers. Gonna convert this into a macro input and name this blocks with the anchor abbreviation B. And then for the second input, these will be the existing piles of blocks, aka the towers. I'm gonna rename the columns to make them more intuitive first. We'll call this tower ID. I don't really need the weight of the towers, so I can remove this column. I'll rename load capacity to be the remaining load capacity and the height to be the total height. Now I can convert this text input into a macro input as well, and I'm gonna name this tower with the abbreviation T. What I want to do next now is I want to add every block from A to Z to every tower from A to Z. I can do this by using the append fields tool. What the append fields tool does is essentially joining every single record in one table to every single record in another table. As this will produce more than 16 records, I'll select allow all appends to not get any error messages. I hit run. Now I get every block joined to every tower. Although there are some blocks that I don't want. Those are, for example, the blocks that they are already present in the tower, and also the blocks that are heavier than the tower's load capacity. So I want to filter these out. I'm going to use a custom filter. I'm going to firstly filter out all the blocks that are already present in the towers. And also, I want to filter out all the blocks that the towers can't really support. And after filtering these records, now I can actually start stacking the blocks on top of the towers. So I'll bring in a formula tool. Now update the tower ID column first. This will be a concatenation of tower ID field and the block ID field. And then I also want to add the height of the block to the total height of the tower. And lastly, I want to update the remaining load capacity, which is now reduced by the block's weight. There are also some instances where the the load capacity of the block is lower than the remaining load capacity of the tower. In that case, I want to use the load capacity of the block as the new minimum to make sure that every block in the tower can support the blocks on top of it. So if the load capacity of the block is lower than the remaining load capacity, then I want to use the load capacity. Otherwise, I just use the remaining load capacity of the tower. After I run this, now I basically just stacked the blocks on top of the blocks in the towers, and I can basically now remove the columns that I don't need. I bring a select tool and I unselect all the columns that I don't need now. Then I can also bring in a filter tool to basically separate the towers that can still support more blocks from those towers that don't have any remaining uh, capacity. So from the false anchor, I have all the towers that don't have any remaining load capacity. I can output these with the macro output, and I call this output. And then from the true anchor, I'll have I'll have the towers that can still support more blocks, and these are the towers that I actually want to go back to the start and get joined again by the new set of blocks. So I want to output these into output which I will call loop, because these are the towers that will go in loop until we use all their remaining load capacity. And so we keep the anchor to be L. And now the last thing for the iterative macro is you need to go to a workflow configuration and select the iterative macro, and then go to the interface designer, go to the properties section, and define the iteration input, which is the tower, and the iteration output, which is the loop. The rest we can keep as it is. And now I just need to save the macro, and I go back to my main workflow. Here I bring in the macro that I just built. Notice that the macro has two input anchors, the B and T. The B is for the blocks, which I can connect directly to the text input. And then for the T anchor is for the towers. That input I need to modify first. So I get rid of the weight column I don't need, and the other columns I'm gonna rename them again. So tower ID, remaining load capacity, and the total height. And now when I run the macro, from the output, I get all the possible combinations of the blocks stacked on top of another. But I'm only interested in the tallest tower. So I'm gonna sort this. I'm gonna sort the total height in descending order. And then I'll only need the first row, the tallest tower. Now when I check the output, the total height is 41, which is same as the max height in the solutions output. As a last thing, I can actually remove the columns that I don't need and rename the total height to max height. And then lastly, bring in the browse tool. And that's pretty much it. That's all for my walkthrough. Uh, thank you all for watching. I hope this has been useful for you all.